There are moments in life when a single sentence can change everything. Moments so quiet, so simple, that nobody in the room realizes history is being rewritten in real time. And yet, when the dust settles, entire futures have vanished, careers collapse, names disappear, doors close forever. Today's story begins in a place where time itself has meaning, where punctuality is not courtesy, it is respect, where showing up late is not an inconvenience, it is a message, and where 4 calm words, spoken without anger, can quietly erase a man from a world he believed he belonged to. Before we continue, write in the comments what you believe is the greatest sign of disrespect a person can show another human being. Your answer might be closer to this story than you imagine. And if you are new here, subscribe, leave a like, and join this community that explores the hidden lessons behind legendary figures, power, loyalty, and the choices that shape destinies. Now let us enter a world ruled not by noise but by silence, not by chaos but by order, not by shouting but by calm eyes that see everything. And Vito Corleone did not need to raise his voice. He did not threaten, he did not insult. His power did not live in the weapons of his men, but in the invisible line that separated those who understood respect from those who merely pretended to. To sit in his presence was not simply an honor, it was a test of discipline, of loyalty, of understanding the unspoken rules that governed everything. On a quiet afternoon, a man was expected. He had been given a time, not a suggestion, not a window, a time. And when that hour arrived, the chair prepared for him remained empty. The room stayed silent. The air did not change. No one rushed. No one complained. But something invisible had already begun to shift. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The clock continued moving forward. But in that room, something was moving backward. The future of a man who did not yet know he had already failed. An hour later, footsteps approached. The man finally arrived. He was breathing fast, adjusting his jacket, forcing a smile. He tried to look confident. He tried to look important. He believed that being late could be explained, that apologies could fix anything, that power could be negotiated. But Don Vito did not stand. He did not change his posture. He did not show irritation. He simply raised his eyes. Those eyes were not angry. They were not disappointed. They were something far more dangerous. They were certain that the decision had already been made long before the man opened his mouth. The visitor began to speak, offering excuses, blaming traffic, blaming circumstances, blaming the world. His words filled the room, but they did not fill the silence, because in that world, excuses had no value. Only actions did. And then Don Vito spoke. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He did not humiliate. He simply said 4 words so calm, so controlled, that at first they sounded almost gentle. But they carried more weight than any scream ever could. You don't belong here. There was no argument, no explanation, no appeal. Those words did not describe the moment. They defined his future. In that sentence, doors closed, alliances dissolved, opportunities vanished. The man did not lose a meeting. He lost his place in a world that runs on respect, timing, and loyalty. And here lies the truth that few people understand. Don Vito did not punish lateness. He punished what lateness represented, a lack of reverence for the rules, for the hierarchy, for the invisible order that holds everything together. In his world, being late was never about time. It was about character, because someone who cannot respect a simple agreement cannot be trusted with anything that truly matters. Someone who arrives when they feel like it will leave when it suits them. Someone who treats small commitments lightly will treat great responsibilities the same way. So those 4 words were not cruel. They were precise. They were not emotional. They were logical. They were not personal. They were structural. They were the sound of a future quietly ending. And as the man stood there, realizing that nothing he could say would change what had already been decided, the room remained calm. Life went on. Conversations resumed. Business continued. But for him, everything had already shifted, and he would carry that invisible sentence for the rest of his life. Because in a world built on honor, patience, and unspoken law, your place is not given, it is earned. And once it is lost, it is rarely returned. And what most people never realize is that moments like this happen everywhere, not just in powerful families, but in careers, relationships, friendships, and life itself. The rules may not be written, but they are always being enforced. And as this man slowly understood that his future had just collapsed in silence, something deeper was being revealed, a code that governs power far beyond crime, far beyond status, and far beyond fear. What truly destroyed that man's future was not the delay itself, but the invisible message his absence delivered. In Don Vito's world, every minute carries meaning. Every pause is interpreted. Every silence speaks. When the man did not arrive on time, he did not simply arrive late. He announced, without realizing it, that his word was flexible, that his discipline was optional, and that his sense of hierarchy was negotiable. Power structures do not collapse because of loud rebellions. They collapse because of small tolerances. A single late arrival becomes permission for disorder. A single ignored rule becomes the beginning of decay. And Don Vito understood this better than any man around him. His calm authority was built not on fear, but on predictability. His people knew where he stood, what he valued, and what would never be accepted. By allowing no exceptions, he protected everyone beneath him. His rules were not cages. They were pillars. They created safety, clarity, and stability. In a world where betrayal was common and loyalty was rare, structure was survival. The man who arrived late believed he was still negotiating. He believed that charm, words, and apologies could rebalance the scale. But Don Vito was not weighing his excuses. He was measuring his reliability. And reliability, once cracked, is almost impossible to restore. Trust is not a promise. It is a pattern. It is not built by grand gestures, but by consistency in small things. Showing up when you said you would. Speaking when you said you would. Standing where you said you would stand. The man failed in the smallest test, and therefore could not be trusted with greater responsibilities. In Don Vito's mind, allowing that man to remain would send a message to everyone else. It would tell them that timing was optional, that discipline could be bent, that structure was flexible. And once structure becomes flexible, chaos follows. This is why the 4 words were not harsh. They were protective. They were not about exclusion. They were about preservation. They were the firewall that kept disorder from entering a carefully balanced world. Those who worked under Don Vito did not fear him. They understood him. They knew that his calm was not weakness, but control. His silence was not indifference, but awareness. And his rules were not cruelty, but clarity. Many leaders shout, few leaders define. Don Vito defined. He defined the boundaries that kept his world from collapsing. He defined the expectations that allowed loyalty to flourish. He defined the code that made trust possible in a place where trust was always under attack. The late man was not rejected because he was unimportant. He was rejected because he was unpredictable. And unpredictability is the most dangerous element in any system built on cooperation and loyalty. In life, people often ask why opportunities disappear without explanation, why doors close without warning, why relationships end without dramatic conflict. They rarely realize that the ending often happened long before the final moment. It happened in the quiet choices, the small delays, the subtle signs of carelessness that slowly rewrote how they were seen. And Don Vito saw everything. His genius was not cruelty. It was perception. He could read patterns, habits, and intentions through behavior that others ignored. He understood that who you are in the smallest moments is who you are when things truly matter. So while the man believed he lost his future in a single sentence, the truth is far more uncomfortable. He lost it in every small decision that led him to arrive late. The 4 words were simply the closing of a door that had been quietly closing for much longer than he realized. And the real lesson here is not about punctuality. It is about presence, about being where you said you would be, about honoring invisible agreements, about understanding that every environment has a code, and that belonging is never automatic. Because in any world governed by order, loyalty, and respect, your place is not maintained by words. It is maintained by consistency. And that consistency, when broken, sends ripples far deeper than most people can imagine. Ripples that Don Vito always noticed. even when no one else did. And as this truth quietly settled over the people who witnessed that moment, a deeper realization began to form, one that reveals not only how Don Vito protected his empire, but how he protected something even more sacred. What Don Vito truly protected was not money, territory, or influence. He protected identity. He protected the soul of his world. Every rule, every silence, every unspoken boundary existed to preserve something far more fragile than power: belonging. In his universe, belonging was not automatic. It was earned slowly, protected fiercely, and lost easily. To belong meant you were trusted with secrets, with protection, with the safety of others. It meant your presence could change outcomes. It meant your absence could create danger. And this is why being late was never a small thing. It was a signal that your presence was not sacred to you, which meant it could not be sacred to anyone else. Don Vito understood that loyalty is not proven in moments of crisis. It is proven in moments of routine. Anyone can claim devotion when danger is loud. Very few can maintain discipline when nothing dramatic is happening. The late man failed not during a storm, but on a calm day, and that made the failure more revealing, not less. Because calm moments show who you really are. They expose whether your values are internal or performative. They reveal whether your respect is instinct or convenience. Those around Don Vito watched carefully. They did not need speeches. They learned through outcomes. They saw that the code was real, that the boundaries were solid, that the structure was not symbolic, it was enforced. And that clarity created something rare in a violent world: stability. Children grew under that stability. Families slept under that stability. Businesses functioned under that stability. All of it rested on the invisible law that Don Vito embodied, a law that said your word is your bond, your presence is your promise, and your timing is your character. The man who was removed did not just lose access to power, he lost access to protection. He lost the invisible shield that comes from belonging to a structure greater than yourself. And once outside, the world becomes colder, louder, and far less forgiving. He would soon learn that opportunities no longer arrived easily. Conversations became shorter. Doors closed more quickly. Invitations stopped. Not because people hated him, but because he was now undefined. He no longer carried the invisible stamp of reliability that opens doors before you even knock. In Don Vito's world, reputation traveled faster than people. Word spread quietly, without announcements. No one said his name with anger. They simply stopped saying it at all. And silence is often the most final judgment of all. Many believe that power is loud, but real power is quiet. It does not announce itself, it simply removes access. It does not destroy, it disconnects. And once disconnected, a person slowly fades from relevance, from influence, from opportunity. This is why Don Vito never needed to threaten. He simply adjusted who belonged. He curated the environment so that only those aligned with the code remained. In doing so, he preserved harmony, clarity, and trust. And the most unsettling truth is this: every workplace, every family, every relationship, and every community operates under a similar invisible law. There is always a code. There is always a standard. There is always a threshold for belonging. People are rarely removed because of one dramatic mistake. They are removed because their pattern no longer matches the structure they are inside. And when that mismatch becomes visible, separation becomes inevitable. The man who arrived late did not fail a meeting. He failed alignment. And alignment is what makes systems work, families function, and trust survive. Which reveals the final and most powerful truth about Don Vito Corleone. A truth that exposes the quiet architecture behind his authority, and the reason his world remained stable while others collapsed. Don Vito Corleone did not rule through fear. He ruled through coherence. Every rule, every alliance, every silence fit together like pieces of a carefully designed structure. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was impulsive. His authority came from the harmony of his system, not from intimidation, but from order. In a chaotic world, order becomes sacred. And Don Vito treated order as a living thing. He protected it, he refined it, he removed anything that threatened its balance. This is why his decisions often appeared cold to outsiders. They were not emotional choices, They were architectural ones. He was not reacting to people. He was preserving a design. The late man represented disorder, not through intention, but through pattern. His behavior did not align with the rhythm of the system, and even a small misalignment can destabilize an entire structure if left unchecked. Don Vito knew that systems collapse not because of enemies, but because of internal inconsistency. So the 4 words were not punishment. They were correction. They were maintenance. They were the tightening of a single bolt before the entire machine could loosen. Those inside the family felt safer after that moment, not because someone had been removed, but because the rules had proven themselves real. When boundaries are enforced, trust becomes possible. When standards are protected, loyalty becomes meaningful. And loyalty was the currency of Don Vito's world. Not money, not influence, loyalty. It determined who received protection, who received opportunity, who received patience. It defined who could make mistakes and who could not. The late man had not earned that margin of error, and so he did not receive it. This was not cruelty. This was hierarchy. In any structure, hierarchy exists to preserve function. It is what allows responsibility to flow clearly. It is what prevents confusion. It is what makes accountability possible. Without hierarchy, loyalty becomes emotional. With hierarchy, loyalty becomes dependable. Don Vito chose dependability, always. And here lies the deeper lesson. Don Vito was not simply removing people. He was shaping behavior. Every decision taught everyone else how to survive, how to belong, and how to remain. His leadership did not speak loudly. It trained quietly. People became more disciplined without being told to be. They became more precise without being threatened. They became more respectful, not because they were afraid, but because they understood what was required to stay inside the structure. And in doing so, Don Vito created something rare, a culture, not rules on paper, but values in action, not commands, but expectations, not chaos, but coherence. This is why his world endured while others fractured, because when leadership is consistent, people adjust themselves. When leadership is unclear, people test limits. Don Vito never allowed confusion to exist. He did not need to explain his standards. He embodied them. And embodiment is stronger than instruction. Which brings us to the final truth, the principle that turns Don Vito from a powerful man into a lasting symbol. The principle that defines why his legacy survived, even when his world changed forever. The legacy of Don Vito Corleone was never built on intimidation, violence, or even wealth. It was built on something far quieter, predictability of character. People knew what he stood for. They knew what he would tolerate. They knew what he would never accept. And that clarity created stability in a world where uncertainty destroyed families, alliances, and futures. He did not need to change the rules often. He simply never broke them. And when leaders do not break their own standards, they become anchors. They become reference points. They become something others can align their lives around. The 4 words that ended a man's future were not harsh. They were consistent. They were not emotional. They were structural. They were not cruel. They were coherent. They were the natural outcome of a world that valued alignment over excuses, presence over promises, and character over charm. That man did not lose his place because Don Vito was unforgiving. He lost his place because Don Vito was precise. And precision is what protects systems from decay. In many ways, Don Vito was not judging people. He was selecting environments. He was curating a world where reliability was sacred, loyalty was lived, and respect was visible through behavior, not words. And this is the part few people recognize. The code that governed Don Vito's world governs ours as well. Not with weapons, not with silence, but with outcomes. Opportunities stay with those who are consistent. Trust stays with those who are reliable. Belonging stays with those who honor invisible agreements. People often think they are being judged by what they say. In reality, they are being judged by what they repeatedly do. Small behaviors quietly define big futures. Small habits silently determine big doors. The man who arrived late did not fall because of one mistake. He fell because that mistake revealed a pattern that did not match the structure he wanted to belong to. And belonging is never claimed, it is demonstrated. This is the silent wisdom Don Vito lived by. Not loud rules, not dramatic speeches, but quiet standards that never moved. So the question left behind by those 4 calm words is not about lateness. It is about alignment, about discipline, about whether your behavior matches the future you want to be trusted with. Because in any world, powerful or simple, your place is not maintained by intention. It is maintained by consistency. And consistency, more than talent, more than charm, more than ambition, is what decides who remains and who quietly disappears.